Is closed. Council will. It was presented to council tonight. The city has undertaken a fairly substantial consultation process in relation to the ground lease with its Your Say page. So certainly, social media was explored as an avenue to enable people to respond. E-petitions, by their nature, are considered, but we consider the merits of all of the consultation that and all of the mediums that is presented to the city.
Mr. Wheeler.
Okay. Mayor, Mr. Arnold Davis at the last meeting asked, will council rescind the motion which authorises the CEO of the City of Stirling to enter into negotiations with the shopping centre to sell off the Carrinup Library site? The answer that was given in the minutes referenced a council resolution from June 2015, which, just like Goldilocks and Rumpelstiltskin and many other fairy stories, made no mention of such delegation. Council Resolution 0516024, however, made on the 3rd of May 2016, and you voted on this item, Mayor Owen, absolutely did resolve to give the CEO authority to enter into negotiations with AMP in regard to the library site. It was passed by a 6-3 vote for a decision required under the Local Governments Act to be made by an absolute majority. 6 was not then and is still not an absolute majority. So to rephrase Mr. Arnold's question, Mayor Owen, given that the resolution was made ultra vires, will the council now rescind it?
I'm happy to investigate that, Mr. Wheeler, and respond to you in writing. I don't know. This is the first I've heard tonight, so I don't have it in front of me. So I'm happy to investigate it and respond to you in writing.
Okay. And on that one, last week, Mayor Owen, you promised Arnold an apology if it was found to be the case. But I think the city owes Arnold a bigger apology. Mr. Davis was informed by council on the 19th of April 2016, and I was at that meeting, that under its local laws, the city would from then on refuse to answer Mr. Davis's questions about the sale of the library site. The city listed 2 or 3 pages of Mr. Davis's questions. It appeared in an effort to belittle Arnold's constant questioning and underline the need and validity of the censure from the city on Arnold. However, Mr. Zelestis QC, who is AMP Capital's barrister, confided in a 2015 DAP agenda, which is available at good libraries everywhere, in relation to the non-existence of an activity centre structure plan, notes that the city's requirements were that AMP agreed to purchase the library land. This is in 2015. AMP have confirmed that negotiations occurred in late 2014 or early 2015 for a potential purpose, for a potential purchase. So, Mayor, my question is, and these are all publicly available documents.
Sure.
I'm not claiming any secret squirrel here. My question is, other than making Mr. Davis's apology monumental in nature, will the city, after some 5 years or more of misdirection, release a statement divulging the full history of negotiations with AMP Capital for sale or redevelopment of the Carrinup Library site, the CEO's and the previous mayor's involvements and associated file notes to provide the transparency and accountability sadly lacking to date in this manner, and it's still going on today?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Wheeler. And I wasn't on council until late 2015, and I'm unaware of that.
Well,
and I can tell you,
you're in the minutes as voting for it, so
yeah, maybe in late, not in the negotiations. There has been no negotiations.
I didn't say you were in
AMP.
negotiations. I said the ex-mayor.
I will stand by it, Mr. Wheeler. There has been no negotiations with AMP.
Sorry?
I will stand by that. I've not, or the CEO have not had open negotiations with AMP on the library site.
You should probably read the DAP report for the original approval
Yep.
for the shopping centre, because it's in there clear as day.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. I'm happy to take that and take your information on those.
Thank you.
Ian Cornell.
Ian Cornell, ratepayer of Mount Lawley for the last 50 years. Good evening, Mayor,
Thank you, Mr. Cornell.
councillors, executives, staff. My question, Mr. Mayor, is somewhat less complicated than what you've had previously, and I've only have one question, so you'll make up some time.
Thank you.
I wrote to you last month, inviting yourself and both Lawley Ward councillors to a meeting and a tour of the locale with a couple of business proprietors and ratepayers of significant Mount Lawley Business Group. The subject is, of course, to further discuss the irrational decision to place a plaza within a car park, thus losing some 7 car bays, then closing the access from Beaufort Street. You declined the invitation to meet, contrary to the Local Government Act, on engagement with ratepayers. Again, on the 3rd of October, I further proposed an offer to meet the same people, of which invitation still remains unanswered. I'm sure you'll get around to it. Does the 60 business proprietors and ratepayers on Beaufort Street need to be an AMP or equivalent to gain your interest in meeting with the elected ward with their elected ward representatives and publicly elected mayor of the city? That's question 1. Question 2, if not, can you advise what does it take?
That isn't that. I'm glad you think it's funny, Mr. Corner. What I will do, and
Yes.
I'm glad you opened it up, because I'm
Yes.
happy to make it transparent and put it in the minutes for the countless meetings that I've had with your group out there and the ratepayers have had and our officers have had. So I'll make sure it's transparent in the minutes of how many meetings we have had with yourselves.
Elected officials, Mayor.
Thank you.
Elected officials.
Happy to put it in writing for you, Mr. Cornell, and it will be in the minutes for everyone to see. Thank you for your questions.
Yeah, and you'll answer my correspondence.
Yes,
To the affirmative.
as I did. Are there any other questions? If not, I will go to item 8, applications for leave of absence. Councillors, are there any requests for leave of absence? Item 9, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder to accept the council minutes of the 22nd September 2020 meeting? Move Councillor Spagnolo, seconded Councillor Proud. If we can go to the vote, please. We're missing Ferranti. Could we have someone to close the door, please? Migdale? Thank you. That is unanimous. Item 10, announcements by the presiding member. I do have a couple of announcements this evening. And the first announcement is I'm pleased to note that the City has received some great news last week following the federal and state government budget announcements, with the City to receive a total of $102.5 million in funding. Following the federal government's 2020 budget announcement on Wednesday, 7th of October 2020, the City will receive over $64 million in funding for transport infrastructure projects. The infrastructure funding includes $45 million for the Stirling bus station interchange, $1,431,569 as part of the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program, $2 million for the Erindale Road, Reed Highway, Hammersley intersection, Urban Congestion Fund, $7.5 million for the Wanneroo Road, Morley Drive, Balcatta intersection upgrade, $1,394,753 as part of the Roads to Recovery Program, and $6,869,115 as part of the Financial Assistance Grant Program. On Thursday, 8th of October 2020, Premier Mark McGowan announced that the 2020-21 state government budget, which allocated a further $40 million towards the next phase of the Stevenson Avenue Extension Project in the Stirling City Centre. This additional funding will ensure that all phases of this project can now be delivered, including a new freeway interchange and Sarich Court connection to Cedric Street. This is a significant investment in the City from both state and federal governments, which demonstrates the City's strong relationship with both governments and will greatly assist the City in delivering major transport infrastructure projects over the coming years. Overall, this is an outstanding achievement for Team Stirling, and I'd like to thank all councillors, the City's CEO, Stuart Jardine, the executive team and the staff for their efforts to advocate for priorities in the City of Stirling. The second announcement, on Friday 25th of September 2020, I attended the Walga Awards ceremony and annual general meeting, which were held at Crown Perth. I'm pleased to advise that 7 of the City's elected members were presented with awards for the Walga Honours Award 2020, along with Local Government Officer. The Walga Honours Awards are a great opportunity to reflect and acknowledge the community representatives who are driving change and opportunities in our city. I would now like to call upon the award winners to present them with their awards. If you just maybe sit down until I finish them, and then you can all stand up together. Councillor Sargent, Councillor Caddy, Councillor Ferrante and Councillor Lagan have received the Walga Merit Award for their personal commitment, eminent service and contribution to the local government sector. And if you'd all like to stand up. And if you can remain standing. Councillor Boothman and Councillor Proud have received the Walga Long and Loyal Service Award for long service of a high degree to local government and local government sector and Walga. And if you'd like to stand up. And if I could start, and I asked John Beaton to come forward. I know he's up the back there. John has worked at the City of Stirling since 2010 and has worked in the local government sector for 53 years. John was awarded the Local Government Distinguished Officer Award for his outstanding contributions made to the local government sector. And John, if you'd like to come forward, and councillors come forward, and I'll present you with your certificates.
Slow down a second, please, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ferrante. Councillor Lagan.
While you're all standing around, I thought, so you can have one photo together, I too would like to make an announcement, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor. I would like to acknowledge you, Mr. Mayor, Mark Irwin, who also received a Merit Award for personal commitment, eminent service and contribution to the local government sector from Wowga. Congratulations.
Congratulations to the recipients. It really is great to see the City of Stirling being recognised as local government leaders. Stuart, as CEO, do you have anything further to add?
Yes, thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I'm delighted to see that our Senior Coordinator Corporate Compliance, John Beaton, has been recognised within the local government sector with a Distinguished Officer Award. John, as a widely respected local government professional, you always find a way to get the job done and done well. Having you on Team Stirling has made a huge difference. Personally, as a CEO and on behalf of the staff, congratulations, John.
Now brings on to item 11, which is unresolved business from previous meetings. I have nil. And item 12, reports and recommendations of committees. Councillors, will now move on to the CEO's Performance Review Committee item. We'll just pause while the CEO leaves the room. Now, as the item is confidential, councillors, if there is no debate on the item, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for council to vote on the committee's recommendation. If there is likely to be debate, if you could indicate, and we'll defer the item to the end of the meeting to go behind closed doors. If not, we'll have a mover, Councillor Sundry, seconder, Councillor Proud, and I'll put that to the vote. Noting that Councillor Ree has left the chamber. We have Councillor Ferrante. Councillor, I don't know if that's come up. We've only got 12. Okay. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, we'll now move on to... We better get the CEO back in the room. Councillors, we'll now move to the Community and Resource Committee items. Any alternative motions that were submitted to Governance have been included together with your running sheet. Items 12.2 PRS1, item 12.2 PRS3, item 12.2 PRS4 and item 12.2 PRS6 are required to be pulled out this evening. Councillors, do you wish to pull out any other Community and Resource Committee items? Councillor Ree.
Yes, thank you. May I have 12.2 CC1 on page 12, please, and 12.2 RL1 on page 24, please.
Yes, any other councillors wish to pull anything out? If not, I will go... Let me see. Yeah, that won't take long. I'll go to item 12.2 CC1. Councillor Sargent, as Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to move the committee's recommendation. We do have a bit of extra wording on the white paper that everyone received on Friday. And if possible, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to include that addition if we can.
That is possible. And is there a second for that motion? Councillor Proud. Anyone opposed? Councillor Ree. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have very much further to add on this one, Mr. Mayor. The reasoning behind the red in the on the screen there, Mr. Mayor, is we had a deputy come to a committee last week and had a bit of an issue around some of the wording that was within the policy, and subsequently the officers have gone and had a chat with the deputy and came up with a bit of extra wording there that pretty much concretes it down a bit. So I'll leave it at that and hear what the debate is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Proud. Thank you. Councillor Ree.
Thank you. Whilst I agree with a lot of the things actually in this particular policy, I'd like some questions answered, please. On page 16, where we've got the impact assessment is identified as the community is considered low, elected members are considered moderate, administration considered low. Could I please have an explanation as why the community, which is get affected the most, is not a high?
Ms Pickering.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your question, Councillor Ree. This assessment has been done based on just the amendment to the policy, so the results of that particular assessment through the e-tool is only the amendment to the policy. So we consider the community impact of that amendment to be low because it's really just building on the original policy, which related to creating procedures and replacing that with an e-tool. So we felt that community impact was low, and likewise the impact to council was also low. Moderate, sorry.
Councillor Ree.
I think that needs to maybe be referred to when we review the whole policy in their entirety. And I think it becomes confusing to people when we change one little bit of the policy and we can't change other parts in the one meeting. It seems to be a management issue that's time consuming. So I think that needs to address. Page 21, we've got definitions. If we look at page 26, we have got, in page 26, we have got, whoops, there we are. We have got 25, we've got engages and supports and considers. I have asked several times before what the definition of considers is. I've asked also what the definition of endorsed. I'm now more confused because we've now got the word engaged. When we look at page 21, we've got all these definitions. Where is engaged, concerned, or anything else endorsed? If we're going to use that sort of nomenclature out to the community, if we're going to use it as a recommendation, then we need to have a definition. Otherwise, it's an interpretation by whomever reads it.
Ms Pickering, would you like to provide any comment to that?
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. On page 21, we do have a definition for community and stakeholder engagement, which is the third one down in the definition list, and then a further definition around community consultation, which is a subset of community engagement. But if we're required, or if it makes it helpful to put in additional definitions, we can certainly add those in.
Councillor Ree.
Thank you. That's wonderful, Mrs. Piccoon, because if we're going to use the word note, concern, engage, then we need to have a definition. And even though it might be captured under a broader definition, those particular words that are being used, the adjective that's describing what we're doing, is nowhere. So I appreciate that. As an example, if I may, I'm just also concerned the way this process is done. And if I could please have clarification, will this address the issue regarding street trees? Because with street trees, as we know, and I'm interested to know, we haven't had anyone from street trees, which means obviously the planting season's finished, that with street trees, they get a letter, and within sometimes a week or 2 weeks, they get a tree. They have no choice on the tree, no choice on location. They've got no choice on anything. And people are getting very upset, as we're well aware.
Let's stick to this item, Councillor Ree.
That's my point.
No, it's a separate item.
No.
It's a completely separate item you're talking about. Let's stick to this, please.
Well, this policy is supposed to be about community and stakeholder engagement. My question is, with the street tree letter, which is supposed to be part of community and stakeholder engagement, will that be captured in this policy, please?
Mr Littleton.
Yeah, look, thank you for the question. Look, the policy in front of you and the e-tool is largely around is project based. The street tree program is program based. So it does talk in the policy around where feedback may not be sought. It's the matter is delivering a policy driven decision. Having said that, the consultation process that we put around the street tree process is quite considered. I would argue that we do send letters out preemptively. We do seek and receive feedback around location and tree species, and we also receive feedback around no trees at all. We generally respond to all of those requests, and in the majority, those issues are dealt with appropriately. What I would say is that we are currently reviewing our street tree planting program at the moment, in light of the general views that have been expressed, to make sure that it is more targeted in the future. We will be engaging with Marielle's team and Josh in particular, just to make sure that the street trees and our footpath program is responsive to community as it can be, and is consistent with the broader issues in this policy.
Councillor Ree.
Thank you. So the answer is no. Thank you.
Councillor Caddy.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I'm very supportive of this, but I do have a small concern about the changes that have been proposed in red, particularly the last part of the sentence that says, and further changes are made to the proposal. The changes should be advertised for a further 21 days. So my concern is about how restrictive that is, because often after consultation, when something comes back to council, we will then make changes based on the consultation. Having made changes based on the consultation, we then don't want to have to go back out to consultation, which seems to be what that's implying. So can I get some clarification or perhaps a modification to those words? Because I'm just worried that we're kind of tying ourselves into a bit of a bind.
Yeah, let's go for Mr Blanchard on that one.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a council policy, and when a matter comes before council, council is able to apply its policy reasonably in the circumstances. So if council doesn't consider that any changes warrant further advertising, council doesn't have to. And I think the final words of the policy state that council can certainly decide not to go out to advertising again.
So an example would be, for instance, some of our planning policies when we go out for consultation, and then we come back and we take that consultation on board and we make some amendments. We then have to state in the resolution that council is basically waiving the need to go out for further consultation? Is that the way we would handle it?
Mr Blanchard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think planning policies are a different category because the consultation under planning is governed by a statutory regime, and we may find ourselves running up against statutory timeframes if we were to do that. This is more project based and is in relation to projects that are being undertaken by the city, and certainly if the intention of council is not to re-advertise, then that would be clear from the council resolution.
Councillor Caddy?
Look, I think that
would
does...
you like to propose
I would actually
an
like
amendment?
the phrase removed from should the outcomes of advertising be formally presented to council. But I'm happy whether the mover and seconder are happy with that. If not, I'm happy that we can probably manage it.
Let's just get Mr Blanchard to comment and see if we can help out.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Potentially the word should could be changed to the word may.
Let's just...
Yes, that'd be fine. Sorry, and remove unless otherwise stated by council.
Councillor Sargent and Councillor Proud, are you happy with those changes?
That's fine with me.
Okay, we're happy to just accept those in the amendment. All right. Anyone else like to speak on this item? Councillor Farrelly?
I forgot to put my, sorry. When I'm just referring to the actual document itself, and it might not be part of the process, so please do tell me. But it's how the city may engage, when the city may engage, the principles guiding the city's approach to community and stakeholder engagement, and when feedback may not be sought. One of the points is the feedback may not be sought when the city is not the decision maker and has no ability to influence the decision. I believe that in some of the regions, such as the Scarborough redevelopment area, ratepayers will probably be looking for the city to make some comment, even if it is not able to be the decision maker, page 19, be the decision maker and has no ability to influence the decision. I think that there is a need in the community to have the city comment on issues that may arise in some of those instances. So I'd like to see I'd like to actually see that disappear out of those lists of when feedback may not be sought.
Thank you. All right.
No, just that one point. Thank you.
Who's got that? Ms Pickering, are you able to provide some comments?
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. This paragraph is really about when it may not be sought. So it's really, it doesn't say that we won't seek it. It's just if there are cases where the city isn't a decision maker and has no ability to influence the decision, then under those circumstances, we may not seek feedback. It doesn't say we definitely won't seek feedback. So,
through you, Mr Chair, I'd like to not see it as a default position. I'd like to see the first position being that there is an opportunity for the city to make some comment. So I'd hate to see it never, appear because it's in the communication policy. I'll leave it at this at the moment, but that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else like to comment? If not, I'll go to Councillor Sargent to close debate.
I don't really have much further to add to this, Mr Mayor. Only to Councillor Farrelly that when this policy comes back to council to be reviewed, then perhaps you can address those concerns then. I'll close with that.
Thank you, Councillor. And with that, close the debate, so we'll put that to the vote. Thank you, councillors, and that motion is carried. And we have 4 Councillor Boothman, Caddy, Ferrante, Lagan, Migdale, Perkoff, Proud, Rees, Handry, Sargent, Spagnolo, Thornton and myself, and against Councillor Farrelly. We'll now go to item 12.2 RL1, the bicycle skills track in the Doubleview ward. Councillor Sargent is chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as chair of committee, I will have to move the committee's recommendation to council, which actually is a procedural motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Proud. And that is a procedural motion to hold this item over. So I will put that motion. If you... We've got Lagan and Ree. And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. No? Oh, that's why it doesn't add up. Noting Councillor Thornton's out of the chamber. We'll now go on to item 12.2, PRS1, the new ground lease over portion of Crown Reserve 12992, Lot 8, house number 368, West Coast Drive, Trigg, to Surfing WA. Absolute majority vote is required for this one. It's been the subject of a petition. And I'll go to Councillor Sargent as chair of the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Caddy will articulate this one far better than I, so I'll hand over to her.
Councillor Caddy.
Thank you, and I move the committee's recommendation to council as printed on page 146.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Farrelly. Is there anyone opposed? Councillor Ree. I'll go to you, Councillor Caddy.
Yes. Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. As councillors will be aware, particularly those councillors who were at committee last Tuesday, Surfing WA is an enormous asset to the Trigg region. They are a community-based sporting organisation, and they provide more than 30,000 participants a year with learn to surf classes. They're coached. They support 120 primary and secondary schools, providing coaching and training in both surfing and water safety activities. They employ more than 50 staff to do this, many of which, or the majority of which, are City of Stirling residents. And they run a number of surf competitions at our Trigg location. And those learn to swim and safety classes, learn to surf, sorry, and safety classes, about 75 to 80% of those are run out of Trigg Beach. So Surfing WA have a massive presence currently at Trigg Beach and are greatly supportive of the community activities at Trigg Beach. But they're doing all of this out of a tiny shed that is way short of what they need to operate. I can't believe that they managed to provide that level of service out of the tiny shed that they've been operating in. The city has been in discussions with Surfing WA for a considerable period of time about moving them and providing them with a better facility. And thankfully, through the last federal government funding round, Surfing WA was able to get a grant for $4 million to redevelop their building, which is amazing. It means that the City of Stirling doesn't have to provide any financial contribution towards that. All they're asking from us is a parcel of land on which to build this facility. Now, so we're being asked to endorse the ground lease. The area of land that they're seeking is one that we've been discussing with them for at least 10 years that I'm aware of, and was part of the original Trigg master plan. I think there's been some misconceptions that they're seeking to clear bushland to redevelop. They're not. The parcel of land is within the Bush Forever zone, but is not bushland. Just for context, also within this Bush Forever zone is St Mary's Primary School and the Millington Oval. So there are a number of areas within this Bush Forever zone that are not bushland. This is one of them. It is a turfed park. It sits between two very large car parks. And one of the really big reasons why we wanted to move the Trigg Surf facility down to this location is because of its proximity to the two very large car parks. They service a large number of schools, as I said. A lot of buses bring students here, and the proximity to the car parking is really important for them. Very importantly, it also takes congestion away from the North Trigg area and spreads the use across the North and South Trigg areas. We get a number of complaints every summer from patrons trying to use Trigg Beach that they can't get a park to the north. And in the last 5 years, the city has spent, I think, $300,000 providing additional car parking up there. This will help to alleviate the car parking congestion and mean we won't have to fork out more money for more car parking. A number of different sites have already been considered. This was by far and away the best site for this use. Surfing WA, as I said, we want to keep them at Trigg. They support our local community. They save lives on our beaches. They're an amazing community organisation. They're also now an Olympic sport, by the way, and it's kind of embarrassing that they're operating out of this little shed. We can't expand their footprint on the current location. We have no option but to move them. I actually think this is a no-brainer. This is absolutely the right location for them, and it's absolutely so important that we keep their presence in Trigg so that they can continue to do the good community work they're doing there.
Thank you. Councillor Farrelly.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. I am also supporting this, and I spoke to the CRC meeting last week, even though I am not a sitting councillor on that. And the reason is that although we've had a lot of information that this is actually is a bushland, bush forever site, as my fellow councillors indicated, it's not. It is within the zone, but it is actually a grassed area. It has, the way they're proposing to build is that they will retain as many of the trees as possible. Two may have to go. We are not looking at a complete demolition of a connection between animal life moving through the Trigg bushland to the beach. That is still there in the continuance between the bushland and the beach land as well. The other side of it is that, and I'm not going to go in great detail because I think my fellow councillor has mentioned a lot of the things that Surfing WA have achieved, but I think we have to recognise that it's a group of volunteers that have got an international competition in Western Australia, down south at the Margaret River Pro. That is an amazing opportunity for all the youth in our state to be involved in. They're running that, as has been mentioned, from a very small, what was initially, I understand, it was the change rooms up there at Trigg Island. And I do recall when they first moved in there, and it was a very small operation, and they have achieved that amazingly well. The way it's run there and the design down there is magnificent. The opportunity to get an iconic design up at Trigg Island, which will fit into the landscape, not overtake the landscape. I don't think as many people will be aware that it's there. The indications are, if the build is done as they are planning, that it'll be actually one of those places where people will be pleased to see it on the landscape. The other side of that is that they are promoting a sport that is enabling all the youth in Perth to be a part of a much bigger opportunity in their lives, and it has been a really fruitful collaboration with the youth of particularly our areas. As a councillor in the Coastal Ward, I'm really happy for it to stay with us. Otherwise, I could see it going down south as the other big venue they run. I noticed that there was a lot of information about the Margaret River Classic bringing in the money. That may be the case, but the fact is all the interaction with a lot of the youth of the area occurs here and also the beaches around. So this is where predominantly it is the greatest asset to have, that particular development. At the moment, there are plant and equipment that are in the volunteers' backyards. There's not enough room for them to house it where they currently are at the Trigg Island. And they do need to have that as part of the general process when they're running surfing carnivals. And I think they've done extremely well since 95, when they moved into that building, to have put on what they've done, to have catered for the youth. And I recently was at the Groundswell Festival handing out some trophies to not just the guys but the girls there, and amazing set of skills that they all showed, and I was really pleased to do so. Quite a difference when I was a teenager and those sort of things weren't really offered to girls. So I'm fully supportive of this. I think they've asked everyone opinion. They've asked Friends of Trig Beachland and Friends of Trig Bushland in the early start of their appraisal, and I've certainly been asking around both those groups and also Surfing WA and the planning and other directors here. I think it's been a very comprehensive undertaking they've put in place before this came here now tonight to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farrelly. Councillor Ree.
Thank you. I'd like to move a procedural motion, please.
Sure. To hold it over.
Yes.
Why can't she?
Don't know how many mayors are around the table. They're all award winners, aren't they?
Okay, so you'd like to hold it over,
Yes, please.
that the item be referred to CRC on the 10th of November. Thank you. All right, John, a seconder for that.
For the reasons.
Seconded, Councillor Thornton.
Do you want me to read it?
It's up on the board. It's clear. What would you like to read?
Well, the people behind wouldn't be able to see because your head's in the way, Mr Mayor.
It's not that big, Councillor.
I know.
You may read it if you'd like.
If it's up further, it might help.
Just read it, Councillor.
That the item, the new ground lease of the portion of Crown Reserve 12992, Lot 8, house number 368, West Coast Drive, Trig, to Surfing WA Inc. be referred to the Community and Resource Committee meeting to be held 10th of November 2020 to allow for officers to address the issues raised from the community, to provide alternative locations for consideration, to evaluate a new building on the existing building envelope, and to provide legal advice on the use of the State Government Bush Forever site.
Thank you, Councillor. And that is a procedure. We have a seconder with Councillor Thornton, so I will put that to the vote. Thank you, councillors, and that motion is lost 2-12 with Councillor Ree and Thornton voting for and other councillors voting against. Councillor Ree, would you like to debate against the substantive motion?
I think we're a bit more confused, and I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Caddy's comment about the misconceptions of what people have written. I don't think anybody sitting there saying whether or not that this, whether Surfing WA has done a good job or a bad job or what it's done for the community, and I think Councillor Farrelly's comments are quite true, that they've done an excellent job. I don't think that's the issue, and I think that's where we've got the misconception. It's not the issue of whether or not they've done a good job or not, because I think everybody says they have, which they have. The issue is building on a Bush Forever site. The issue is building more on a Bush Forever site than we had before. That's the issue. It's not whether or not they deserve it. It's not whether or not they should have it. It's not whether or not they do a good job. The fact is where the location is. The whole reason we have Bush Forever sites gazetted is to ensure that we have a green footprint, an environmental footprint, that we are trying to make the best. We keep talking about our million trees. Why have a million trees? Well, let's plant them, but let's just destroy 10. Is that how we're doing the maths? This is what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be protecting the environment. That's why we're decision makers. I don't see any reason why we can't redevelop on the footprint they've got. I don't know why we can't redevelop somewhere else on the site. I mean, there's a lot of potential down there that can be rejigged if we wanted to without reusing what's already there that's bush. That is my whole point. It's got nothing to do with whether they're good, bad or ugly, because I think that's already been established, and that is where the misconception is, and that's where the scaremongering is. It's nothing to do with it. I think it's totally about where it's supposed to be, and that is the issue. There is no reason why they can't redevelop right where they are, a better building, make it fit for purpose. It'll be excellent. By putting it on another site, they're actually limiting their ability to use that flat land as well. And I know fair well, my sons did it as well. My auntie lives across the road, and I, like a few others around the room, grew up down at Scarborough, grew up down at Triggs. We know what it's like. I can even walk there now. It takes me a bit longer, but I can walk there. You know, so we know how important it is down there, but we also know how important every little bit of land is. To take away that land that's there is so wrong, and we're supposed to be the gatekeepers. I think it's so important that we use what we've got there redevelop it where it is actually on the site. That's what is good governance. That is what we're looking for the environment, and I think that's what's important. And to sit there and camouflage it all with they're good or they've done this, that and the next thing, that doesn't take away our responsibility. This is about a ground lease. It's not about Groundhog Day of whether or not we get up every day and we do the same thing and we make it better. That's not what we're here for. We're here to sit there and make better use of the land and be responsible. And our responsibility is right there, looking after the Bush Forever site, looking after places and organisations that do the right thing. Surfing WA does do the right thing by our youth. It does do the right thing by keeping people active. It does have a great following. That's never ever been disputed. It's where it is that is being disputed. And I'm sure if the officers worked with them, we could actually rejig that site, redevelop it where it is today. And I'm sure that would make most sense to more people. They would still get what they want, the environmentalists would get what they want, and we wouldn't be compromising where we are today. Now, before I end, I'd like the legality, please, which is one of the issues that I raised, that it is very disturbing a report only sits there and goes through a whole lot of things that are not relevant to what we're supposed to be doing. It's about a ground lease. The thing is, it is a Bush Forever site which is not mentioned in this report, which, as the CEO mentioned beforehand, the whole reason we have reports is that we make informed decisions. We can't make informed decisions if we don't have all the information. This is a Bush Forever site, which Mr Littleton confirmed to me in writing. Why isn't it in the report? Number one. And number two, where is the legality of us allowing and our approval, because it's actually not our land,
Point
to
of order,
allow
Mr.
development, please?
Thanks. What's your point of order?
My point of order, Mr. Mayor, is that we did receive a memo that covered the Lands Act with regard to Bush Forever and the allowances that apply with regard to the use of this land.
Thank you.
So suggesting that we're not fully informed is incorrect.
Thank you, Councillor. And I was about to go to Mr Littleton to clarify the white paper that all councillors received that clarified all that. Mr Littleton.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Look, just to confirm, there is no legal impediment to the city actually constructing or permitting a ground lease over Bush Forever. We did provide that clarity to council through the white paper, but just to be absolutely crystal clear, there is no legal impediment to us supporting a ground lease over this site.
Councillor Thornton.
May I finish, please, Mr Mayor?
You're out of time.
Well, I'd like to make just a small comment that my comment regarding informed decisions, Councillor Lagan, is that it wasn't in the report. That it wasn't in the report. It might have been in the white paper, which the public doesn't get access to.
It was attached to the agenda in a white paper to all councillors. Let's be clear.
Wasn't in the original.
Councillor Thornton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, first and foremost, this item is a planning issue. It's also an issue of loss of amenity. I think it's beside the point about a club being deserving of or not. That's a given. We know that they're very deserving, so are many other clubs in our city. But this is a planning issue that we have to address. And with the other, I believe the other thing that we also have to consider is that it was strongly opposed by the local people. We had 472 people that democratically signed that petition. They weren't coerced. They weren't misled. They don't want that particular site being used. Also, I would like to point out that the Trig Master Plan has a number of items on there that weren't actually also in the report that were, if we're giving such weight to the master plan, why aren't we also considering point 58, which is to enlarge and enhance the existing park there that this proposed building, this ground lease is going to, or the building is going to be built on, and also part 59 or point 59 that there's more native trees in the parkland. Why isn't that also in the report? It's really disappointing that we've only just considered and looked at one aspect, and that's just building of that in the master plan and not the other points that if this should hold so much weight, then we should be considering everything in the Trig Master Plan. I also find it really hard to believe that there's not another suitable site. We have 2 huge car parks there, which are about 200 metres long each by 40 metres long, and we have to pick the greenest,
Through the chair, thanks,
lushest,
Councillor.
we have to pick the greenest, lushest, most treed spot in that whole area. And by building this building here, we're going to remove the amenity for the local people and also our visitors. I just find it, really hard to believe that we can't come up with another location within that vicinity. So in conclusion, I just think that we should really be trying to find win-win situations, and I don't believe this is one of them. I think by removing this public green open space, we're not listening to the community, and the community have spoken. They're strongly opposed to this, and I believe that there's better locations for it, and we should be looking at those.
Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Perkoff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And can I thank the ward councillors for their comments and their vision. Now, Mr. Mayor, as many here would know, through my social media, I spend a good deal of time down at Trigg Beach with my family. Love the place. Look, I'm not a surfer, but frankly, I'm very excited by the prospect of this development, which will become the new home to Surfing WA. Now, Mr. Mayor, as they say in the movies, build it and they will come, but it is important that it's built thoughtfully and inclusively of the greenery and the vegetation becoming of those sand dunes and the proximity to the ocean. Now, I will be supporting this motion this evening, and I know that this building will become the jewel in the crown for Surfing WA.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Proud.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Littleton, if I could please. At committee last week, I did ask the legal financial implications of $4,000, and I just wonder if Mr. Littleton has had time since last week to actually address that with Surfing WA. My thought was I would prefer that to be coming out of their coffers and the grant money they got rather than City of Stirling coffers, because we'd get a few bench seats, etc., out of $4,000. Thank you.
Mr. Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. Look, no, we haven't spoken to Surfing WA at this point in time, but I'm very sure that they'd love to cover those legal fees, councillors. Look, I can't guarantee that, but I'm sure we'll have a conversation.
Well, thank you. I can't. Obviously, I'm not proposing to add anything here, but just to follow, how do we follow through on that and make sure that they're very happy and they've granted it?
Thanks, Councillor Pratt.
Well, that had a question mark after it.
Did it?
Yeah.
Okay, it was cryptic. Mr. Littleton.
Look, I just confirm, we'll certainly follow that up once a determination's made tonight.
You'll try hard, right? Thank you.
Councillors, is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this? If not, I'll go to Councillor Caddy to close debate. Councillor Spagnolo.
Don't worry, Mr. Mayor, I'll be very quick. Yeah, look, it's a shame when you've got two communities, one supporting something and one not supporting something. Look, we all know the good work that the WA Surfing Association does. They do a great job out there. A lot of it's voluntary, and you know, they're certainly recognised for that. I think the important thing is that we have had a lot of complaints or objections. There've been 400. It's a shame that we can't find some common ground. Look, my view on this is the ward councillors obviously have done their research, and they believe that it is suitable. And on that basis, I'm happy to support them. But we need to be mindful that there are people out there that have some concerns, and it would be nice on the way if we could actually look at addressing some of those concerns. Obviously, we can't address the main thing, which is the location, but they've raised a few other things which I think are important. And, you know, perhaps, as I say, on the way, we could look at those as well.
Thank you. And no other indication, I'll go to Councillor Caddy to close debate.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think most of the concerns are around the location, and I can absolutely assure everyone that over the time that I've been on council, we've certainly looked at many different locations, and this one is the one that stacks up. We can't build it on the car park because we need the car parking to support the facility. Most of the area around Trigg Beach is actually bushland. This is one of the few spots at Trigg Beach that isn't actually bushland. And one of the criteria we stipulated to Surfing WA right at the start of this discussion was you absolutely need to minimise the impact on this bushland because, you know, that is very precious to us. So part of the reason that it is being built on this little piece of parkland that is grassed is because this is the area where it has least disturbance on the bushland. So I think we really need to understand that just because it's a bush forever zone doesn't mean we're allowing them to build, doesn't mean we're turning our back on conservation, because it has absolutely been strongly stipulated that the site must be chosen to minimise the impact on the dunes, and in fact it has virtually none. And I think it's important for councillors to understand that the DEWA have been consulted and have confirmed that a clearing permit is not required because it is predominantly cleared area and will have no impact on nearby vegetated area or ecosystems. So it's not just us who've made that conclusion, DEWA have as well. Look, it is the best location. Everything is a compromise. I understand that some of the community are concerned about the loss of this little piece of park, but it is important for councillors to understand that Clarko Reserve, which is a massive public park, is less than 300 metres up the road. So while I understand the community's concerns, and we will be working with Surfing WA, in fact discussions have already been had about how we can try to coexist as best as possible on this parkland and provide as much residual amenity for the community as we can. It does come down to a compromise. There's no other place to put it, and we need to retain them at Trigg. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And with that, that closes debate. So I will put that item. Move Councillor Caddy, seconded Councillor Farrelly. If you could all vote, please. Have Lagan to vote, thanks, and Caddy. Thank you, councillors, and that motion is carried. And for we have councillors Boothman, Caddy, Farrelly, Ferrante, Lagan, Migdal, Perkoff, Proud, Sandri, Sargent, Spagnolo, Thornton and myself. And against Councillor Ree. Thank you. That's done, Surfing WA, yeah, if you want. And it's we'll now move on to item 12.2, PRS 3, acquisition, closure and dedication of right-of-way 29022 being lot 66, house number 46R, Normanby Road, Inglewood. Outcomes of advertising. There is a financial proximity interest, so Councillor Sandri will also leave the chamber. Councillor?
Excuse me, through the chair, I would like to speak to 12.2 PRS 2, and I'm sorry when that was being asked at the start. That is the terms of reference and appointment of Strategic Property Advisory Group.
Let me check. I don't know if we can still pull it out.
Okay.
But
let's
deal with this one and we'll go back. We'll talk to governance and find out. So item 12.2 PRS 3, Councillor Sandri has left the chamber. Councillor Sargent as chair of the committee.
I'm cringing a little bit, Mr. Mayor. I will move the committee's recommendation.
Don't cringe, Councillor Sargent. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Migdal, is anyone opposed? Councillor Lagan? Councillor Sargent?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the reason I cringed a little bit was this got a lot of discussion at committee, and it ended up coming down to a casting vote in the end because it was a half-half kind of situation. So, Mr. Mayor, this has come to committee as a result of the residents wanting to close a portion of a right-of-way. This right-of-way is a T-junction, and they want to create a L-shaped right-of-way by closing off a portion of it. In the report today, it has 3 different options on what we can do with this right-of-way. We can allow the resident to close off this portion that they're requesting and give the other part of the T top of the T, if you will, to the City of Stirling. We can do nothing, or we can actually purchase this right away. The recommendation on the board, Mr. Mayor, is to allow the resident to take control of their portion of the right away that they currently own and cede off the rest of it. For me, generally, Mr. Mayor, when I went into committee, I had this thought that the officer's recommendation wasn't too bad. So I was leaning towards that recommendation, which is on the board tonight, Mr. Mayor. But the only questions I kind of had was around if we close off that portion of the right-of-way, will they have enough access within the right-of-way for the community today and going into the future to get in and out of there? So that was one question I had in my head. And the other one was, as Councillor Lagan put it at committee last week, the creation of a super block and what the development potential of that block ended up being. So those were the two questions I had in my head when I went to committee. Now, Councillor Lagan spoke quite animately at committee, which actually made me want to actually go down there, Mr. Mayor, and see this right in the way. So my first thought at the time, Mr. Mayor, was they're using it like they own it, which, funny enough, and I was about to walk down it when I saw the grass was higher than this table, and I thought, and walk down that the entire length of the right. So that was my little into the right of way. Build into the right-of-way. Examples across the City of Stirling of other, and some information to us that potentially they can build possibly 5 residences on this particular